Okay, Shavua Tov, everybody.
Shavua
Isru
Tov.
Chag Sameach. And if you are in Chutz La'aretz, then you shouldn't be on this screen. Okay, spare a thought for all those folk who are still having their matzah today. Don't know about you, but I had quite enough of it. Thank you very much. Right, we have got a job to do on chapter 4. We've got one pasuk to go through, which is seemingly completely out of place for the rest of the chapter. I'm going to share the screen with you straight away so that you can see what's going on. There we go. So let me remind you of what chapter 4 was all about. Chapter 4 was about the story of Rechav and Baana, the sons of Rimmon, who murdered King Ishbosheth and brought his head to King David, thinking that he was going to get a reward. And for his troubles, he did not get a reward. He got done in. Okay? And that was basically the entire chapter. We go to the last pasuk of the chapter. We can see here, and David commanded the young men, and they slew them. This is Rechav and Baana, cut off their hands and feet, hanged them up beside the pool in Hebron. But the head of Ishbosheth they took and buried in the grave of Avner in Hebron. And that's where we left it off. We had this story that Rechav and Baana killed Ishbosheth, tried to ingratiate themselves with David, and they did not succeed. Not only that, they were hanged up with their feet and hands cut off in order to show that David severely disapproved of their actions of killing Ishbosheth. And of course, the reason for that was that David was busy at this time trying to unify the country, try and unify Shevet Yehuda, of which he was already the king, with the rest of Israel, or basically Binyamin, who was the leading tribe at that time, the king of whom was Shaul's family. But verse 4 interrupts this whole narrative with a very strange pasuk. A very strange pasuk that tells us what's going on with Jonathan. And we have to explain it because it makes no sense at all. Let's just read it in its context. And Saul's son heard that Avner had died in Hebron, and his hands became feeble, and all Israel were dismayed. This is Ishbosheth. And Saul's son, Ishbosheth, had two men. The name of one was Baana, and the name of the second was Rechav, sons of Rimmon, sons of Benjamin. And the Beerotites fled to Gittaim, and they were living there until this day. Brackets. And Jonathan, the son of Saul, had a son who was lame in his feet. He was 5 years old when the news of Saul and Jonathan came from Jezreel. And his nurse carried him and fled. And it was in her haste to flee that he fell and became lame. And his name was Mephibosheth. And the sons of Rimmon, Rechav and Baana, went and came in the heat of the day. So you can see that this makes no sense to this pasuk here. It interrupts the story. Verse 5 is a natural continuation of verse 3. So the question is, what is this very strange pasuk doing here? Yes, Hannah.
It makes sense if you want to show that the house of Saul isn't finished yet, because his last son has been murdered. Ostensibly, there are no more. But there's another one. There's Saul's grandson. And the text is telling us that there is still a grandson around.
Okay, very good. Very good. I think that is a very sensible explanation of why we're told this at this point. It's still in a bit of a strange place. You'd have expected it either to be at the beginning of the chapter or after they've killed him, but yeah, it's a very good explanation, Hannah. The text is telling us that the house of Saul was not yet fully done, although it was a bit schwach. The only one left is this cripple, this Mephibosheth, who is lame in his feet. Now, what we might want to know, and the Tanakh does not at this point tell us, is what happened to this Mephibosheth?
What's the relation between Mephibosheth and Ishbosheth?
Nephew.
Nephew, right. Yeah.
Ishbosheth was Jonathan's brother.
Right, yeah.
Mephibosheth was Jonathan's
Son, yeah.
son.
Right, okay.
So that makes him the nephew of Ishbosheth.
And
Now,
what does Mephi mean?
what does sorry?
Mephi. We've got Ishbosheth and we've got Mephibosheth. I wondered what's his name, whether the name was significant.
Yeah, I think the name is significant because if you remember when we spoke about Ishbosheth, we looked in a place called Divrei Hayamim, Chronicles. Now, we've mentioned Chronicles a few times in our learning, and we've actually gone and looked at the psukim in Chronicles, Divrei Hayamim. Perhaps now's a good opportunity just to take a step back and talk a little bit about what Chronicles is, and then we can understand what we're going to see. And I'm going to show you something in Chronicles in a moment about the name to answer your question. So what is Divrei Hayamim? Has anybody ever learned Divrei Hayamim? No,
Chronicles. Divrei Hayamim means chronicles.
Yeah, well, what does that mean?
Chronicles means like memos of what happened in the past. It's like a history.
Yeah, exactly. Chronicles is a history. I didn't know what Chronicles were. I thought Chronicles were what the priest wore, but those are canonicals. The only chronicle I knew was a Jewish chronicle.
Exactly,
right?
History.
But of course, the Divrei Hayamim. What does Divrei Hayamim mean in Hebrew? What's the translation of those words?
Divrei,
the events of the day.
Things of the past.
Yeah.
No, that's not what it means at all, Philip.
The events of the day.
History.
Divrei.
The events of the day.
The events of the day. Well, it doesn't mean that either, does it? It really means
words of the day.
The words of the day. Yeah. But
no,
you're all right, because that's what Divrei Hayamim is. It is a history, and it is a listing of the day, the events of that particular time. It is basically the last book of Tanakh. The last two books of Tanakh the last book of Tanakh split into two, and it is basically a history book, and it tells you who did what and when. And so, if we go and have a look at Divrei Hayamim, chapter 8.
Can I make a comment?
Yes.
Dvarim in Hebrew is right. Davar is ledaber is to talk, but davar is the same word, and divrei can just as easily mean things as it can mean spoken words.
True.
And things of the days, in my opinion, would interpret as events of the days.
Yeah, true. Agreed. And it is a chronicling of the events of the day, which is why I suppose the English translation of Divrei Hayamim has become Chronicles. So when we look in Chronicles, in chapter 8 of Divrei Hayamim Aleph, this is what we get. Verse 34 reads as follows. And Jonathan's son was Meriv Baal, or Meriv Baal holid et Micha. Jonathan's son was Meriv Baal, and Meriv Baal gave birth to Micha. And then the sons of Micha, all these people, and then Achaz got all these people, and then all these people again, and then in the next generation, and the next generation, the next generation, and we get to verse 40, and let's work out how many generations we've gone actually. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Yeah, 11 generations on from Jonathan, we get to verse 40 in Divrei Hayamim chapter 8. And the sons of Ulam were mighty warriors who draw the bow, with many children and grandchildren, 150. All these were the sons of Benjamin. So Hannah was quite right to tell us that over here, we're being told that the house of Shaul is not yet finished. We might think from chapter 4, verse 4 here, that the only one that was left was this lame fellow Mephibosheth, and that basically it was done. But Divrei Hayamim tells us something different. Now, to go to Avril's question, Jonathan's son was Meriv Baal. What did we call him in chapter 4?
Idol worshipper.
Okay, Meriv Baal. Meriv means riv. What does riv mean?
To fight.
To argue, yeah. Argue
or fight, yes. So Meriv Baal?
He fought the Baal.
He fought the Baal, yeah. So this would be somebody who is Baal particularly associated with?
Achav.
Isabel.
Well, Baal was a god, yes, but whose god was Baal particularly?
The Canaanite.
Yes, the Canaanites. So I think you can gather from his name that he was somebody who fought the gods of the Canaanites, Jonathan's son, Meriv Baal. Do you think that that is the same person as Mephibosheth, or maybe it's his brother? What do you think, folk?
Yeah, Mephibosheth is a derogatory name.
Yes, I think that's right. In the same way as Ishbosheth. Does anybody remember what Ishbosheth is referred to as in Divrei Hayamim? He's referred to as Ishbaal.
Yeah, idol worshipper, yeah.
Ishbaal. And Ishbosheth, what does Boshet mean?
Shame.
Shame, yes, shame. Not as in shame as in chaval, it's a shame. Shame as in busha.
Busha.
Yeah. Busha v'cherpa. Shame. So nobody's going to call their kid Ishboshet, man of shame. Right? Nobody's going to call anybody Mephibosheth. Now, to answer Avril's questions, what does Mephi mean?
From the mouth of.
From the mouth, yeah? Me is from, P, mouth. Mephibosheth, from the mouth of shame. Again, nobody's going to call their kid that. These are names which, and we see this all the time in Tanakh, names are given to people on the basis of their actions and the basis of what happens to them throughout their life. Moshe, for example. Why was Moshe called Moshe?
Was drawn out of the water.
Correct. Min hamayim mishitu. From the water you were drawn. So that's why he got the name Moshe. What was the name that his mother gave him?
Mm.
He actually had 10 names, but the name that his mother gave him, anybody at the Shia yesterday?
No.
My Shia yesterday. Philip was, I think. Okay, he's gone. He's disappeared. Because we mentioned something yesterday in the Shia, actually, that when Moshe was born, what did his mother say about him?
Tip of my tongue.
Let's see if I can put it up on the screen for you while you're thinking. What did his mother say about him when he was born? It's Shemot chapter 2. There we are. Vatahar ha'isha, and the woman conceived Vatele Bain, and she gave birth to a son. Vatera oto ki tov hu. She saw that he was good. What was his name, Hannah? Yes, Hannah's got it. His name was Tuvia. Tuvia. That was his name. That was the name that he was given by his mother. Anyway, that's Moshe's name. I don't know how we got onto that, but anyway. So Mephibosheth is not his real name, not his given name. It's a name that he gained. Presumably, it was a shame. It was a busha to be lame back in those days, and he was, given that name, Mephibosheth. But when we go to Divrei Hayamim, interestingly enough, we said Ishbosheth's name was Ishbaal. And what was Jonathan's son called? Meriv Baal. So I think we can say, or the Meforshim say, that this Meriv Baal was in fact the same person as Mephibosheth and was not his brother. Okay, so we see that although he was lame, he ended up with mighty warriors. Now, what's interesting is here, how is he described as his descendants, are described as
Great warriors.
Anashim Giborei Chayil. Great warriors, yes. Mighty warriors, Giborei Chayil. Who else was described as a Gibor Chayil?
Shaul.
Shaul, yes. When?
Right at the beginning.
Yes, actually.
After Gilgal.
Paul is almost completely correct, but not quite.
No.
Not quite.
What's new?
But he's absolutely right at the beginning. But it's not actually Shaul who's described as an Gibor Chayil. Can you remember exactly who it was, Paul?
Jonathan.
The other way around. His father. Have a look at there, chapter 9 of Shmuel Aleph on the screen for you now. Vayhi ish mi ben Binyamin, ushmo Kish, ben Avichad, ben Aviel, ben Tzoror, ben Bechorat, ben Afiach, ben Ish Yemini, Gibor Chayil. This man Kish was described as a Gibor Chayil right at the beginning, Paul. Velo haya ven ushmo Shaul. And he had a son who was called Shaul, and he was a head and shoulders above everybody else, etc. So the father of Shaul was described as Gibor Chayil. But if it's any consolation, Paul, when I read that Divrei Hayamim, I also thought it was Shaul, and that's why I went to this pasuk, and I found actually that it was his father. But there you go. Interesting that the family of Shaul were Giborei Chayil. When we get to Divrei Hayamim, 11 generations on from Jonathan, therefore 12 generations on from Shaul and 13 from Kish, they're described as Anashim Giborei Chayil. It's an interesting thing. So to go back to our pasuk, which was sort of, we had this question on, I think Hannah's right that with our background knowledge of Divrei Hayamim, this is perhaps the author's veiled criticism of Rechav and Baana in thinking, before they've even done any actions, because they haven't yet killed him when we hear about Jonathan and Mephibosheth. Perhaps this is a veiled criticism of them for even thinking that the house of Saul is done and we should now hand over to David. Because that's clearly what they're doing. They have decided that Ishbosheth's done for without Avner, waste of time. There's nobody else to take over from the house of Saul. So we might as well throw our lot in with the upcoming star, who was David. And that's what they did. But this pasuk here is telling us that actually the house of Saul was not yet done. There was still this Mephibosheth who was lame. However, with our background knowledge of Divrei Hayamim, that might have been an option. It might have been an option for Rechav and Baana, instead of being traitorous to their leader, Ishbosheth, to have given support to the house of Saul. Presumably, Ishbosheth didn't have any children. We don't hear about any children of Ishbosheth, because if they did have children, then he would be the natural successor, wouldn't he? So we don't hear about any children of Ishbosheth. So we assume that he didn't have any. And therefore, the next in line for the throne would be his nephew, Mephibosheth. So I think that this is here to tell us that Rechav and Baana were chancers. Yeah, they were chancers. They were opportunists. They didn't like what they saw with Ishbosheth, got rid of him, and decided to take a chance and ingratiate themselves with David. As is usually the case with chancers, eventually they come unstuck, and they did come unstuck in a big way and ended up hanged at the pool of Chevron. So
presumably, Johnny, because he was
Paul.
lame, they thought he was of no consequence.
Yeah, that's exactly the case.
They didn't kill him, so otherwise they might have killed him as well.
Yeah, that's probably true, Paul. That's probably true. They probably thought, oh, he's a bit of a nabuch. We don't need to worry about him. He's not going to be any threat to anybody. And of course, we see later on, don't we, that because of the oath that Jonathan and David had taken on Erev Rosh Chodesh all those years ago, they made an oath, didn't they, to one another, that they would forever be look after one another's families, that the descendants of David and the descendants of Jonathan would forever be in a pact together. And of course, when David is trying to he's got the I thought it would be Philip. Right, we've muted him. What was I saying? Yes. So when David wants to try and pacify the Gibeonites, because Shaul had wiped them out, or had massacred a whole load of Gibeonites, and the Gibeonites say, "Give me 7 sons of Shaul," the Tanakh tells us that David did not give any of Jonathan's children, because of the pact that they had made on Erev Rosh Chodesh all those years ago. So Jonathan's son Mephibosheth may not have been a threat seen to be a threat to Rechav and Baana, but Jonathan protected Mephibosheth, and thereby presumably allowed him to have children and grandchildren, and 12 generations later, there he is with Giborei Anashim Giborei Chayil. So I think that the answer, Hannah's answer as to why this pasuk is there, is a correct answer. That it's there to tell us that actually the house of Shaul was not yet fully done. Let me just check, because it's a little while since I looked at this. Let me just check if there's any other things I want to tell you about this particular pasuk, why it's there. Yeah, interesting, Paul. The Metzudat David says exactly your pshat. The Metzudat David says that it's here to say that the intention of the Be'erotites, and particularly Rechav and Baana, in the killing of Ishbosheth was to appoint David as king, because there was no one left of the seed of Shaul to appoint as king after him, because they thought that Mephibosheth was unfit for the throne, inasmuch as he was lame in his feet. So exactly as you said, Paul, they didn't consider him fit. Not only did they not consider him a threat, they didn't consider him fit to be king, and therefore he's dismissed as being of any importance, and therefore they're going to throw their hat in with David. And so yeah. Yeah, so that's the end of that. We now need to go on to chapter 5. So that's very nice and neat. Now we know why that pasuk is there, and our question has been
Can I
answered
make a
nicely.
comment?
Yes.
I think the text is also telling us how he became lame, to tell us that there's nothing psychologically wrong with him. He's not an idiot or anything. He's not incapacitated mentally. He just happened to have an accident. His nurse dropped him, and that's how he became lame. It's a physical thing, and it's not a mental thing.
Good, I like that. Yeah, that's good. It's interesting, that, isn't it? Because let's say, let's take that on board, and yet, despite that, Rechav and Baana didn't think that he was fit for being a king. Now, if we go back to Shaul, let's go back to Shaul. Why was Shaul, well, how was Shaul described when he was appointed as the king? Verse 2 on the screen there, chapter 9, Shmuel Aleph.
Young and handsome.
Young and handsome. Head and shoulders taller than anybody else. So what was important back in those days?
Physical attributes.
appearance.
Yeah, physical attributes were very important. So if we accept that, then that would explain why Rechav and Baana thought that Mephibosheth was not fit to be a king. We know better than that, don't we? That actually physical attributes are not what is the most important thing to be a leader or a king. The most important thing are the mental attributes, which, as Hannah quite rightly points out, there was nothing wrong with Mephibosheth's brain. We don't hear that his nurse dropped him on his head. Well, she might have done, but we only know that she dropped him on his foot. And so we don't know that he's got anything wrong with him mentally. But clearly, physical attributes were very important, which also is surprising that David was made king then, isn't it? Because he wasn't particularly physically, what's the word? Impressive.
Outstanding.
Yeah, he was outstanding.
He was handsome.
He was handsome, yeah, and he was, but he was a gingy.
He was small.
He was small. He was a gingy. Yeah, he certainly wasn't impressive in his appearance like Shaul was. But anyway, having said that, he had proved himself in battle by this time, hadn't he? On more than one occasion. He'd done in Goliath, and he'd also killed 10,000 Plishtim. So I think he probably came fairly well recommended. Let's go to chapter 5 then.
Johnny?
Yes, David?
Have you covered previously why the nurse fled? Why the nurse fled, rather? Why the nurse fled? Well, what does it say? Let's have a look. The nurse fled because she heard that Saul and Jonathan had been killed. Yeah. That's what the pasuk says.
And presumably, what did she think? She thought...
You go after the family.
Yes, that's right. She thought that the Plishtim would then, because that's what you did. That's right, correct. Thank you for reminding me of that, David. What happened then, we see it in Tanakh all the time, is that the victor, the first thing that the victor does is to wipe out the family of the previous leader. We see that even in modern history, actually.
Comment?
Yes.
Our neighbours in Jordan, across the river, when King Hussein died, his brother had been regent all the years. But towards the end, he made his son the heir, and his son came into power, and he wiped out. He got rid of everybody in his uncle's contingent, his uncle's supporters. In this day and age, he got rid of everybody. He didn't kill them.
That's exactly what I just said, and that's a great example. What I just said there was happens in modern history, and that's a perfect example. And it's happening in Syria as well. That the Alawites, who have been deposed by the next bunch of terrorists, they will all be wiped out. The Alawites will all be wiped out by the next bunch of terrorists. And when this one is done in, whenever that will be, then the next lot will wipe his lot out, because that's how it goes. And so, yes, you're quite right, David. Thank you for reminding me on that. The reason she ran away, this nurse, was to protect Mephibosheth from the Philistines, who would, first thing they would do is to wipe out the rest of Saul's family so that there were no pretenders to the throne anymore. Yes, correct. And it's interesting, isn't it? Just occurred to me that there are other examples in Tanakh, aren't there, where the nurse of a particular person is painted in a very, very positive light. Example?
Rivka.
Rivka, what was her nurse called?
Devorah.
Devorah, yes, correct. Devorah Meineket Rivka. She was the nurse of Rivka, and she looks after Rivka basically all her life. And you know, when I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking what comes into maybe I'm a bit crazy, but what comes into my mind is Downton Abbey.
Mm-hmm.
Right, well, the way the sort of the servants are incredibly loyal. They're incredibly loyal to their masters and mistresses. Not that I watched Downton Abbey, but I did watch the first series. Found it rather fascinating. Then I got a bit bored with it. But you see, in that sort of generation, I think it's not that long ago, was it? 100 years ago.
The Queen's entourage was also very loyal to her.
Yeah, very loyal. So we see that right in Tanakh. Devorah was the nursemaid of, and also, again, we were talking about this yesterday in the shiur. What does Miriam say to Bat Paro? She says, "I'll go and find you a nursemaid from the Hebrews." She didn't know she was going to go and find his mother, but the idea of having a nurse to look after somebody and look after them very loyally is quite well recognized. And here's a good example that this nurse didn't just run away and save her own neck. She tried to save Mephibosheth. Never, she fell over and dropped him, and he became lame. But
again, just I want to make a comment.
Yeah.
In our day and age, in Mumbai, when the terrorists attacked Bet Chabad, the nurse took the child and hid with him, and later brought him to Israel.
Okay, another example.
Nobody remembers.
I remember the attack. I don't remember that specific, but
she hid with him and kept him quiet. He was only little. He was maybe 4 or 5, He's only recently had his bar mitzvah here in Kfar Chabad, but she hid with him until everything was all clear, and she saved his life.
Another heroine. Another heroine.
In our day and age.
On the other hand, Johnny, the Philistines didn't go after Ishbosheth.
No, they didn't. Well, they didn't kill him. I know we don't know if they didn't go after them, but maybe, Paul. They thought, they knew that he was Schwachemeises, and he didn't pose a threat. I don't know. It's a fair question, though. Fair question. Right, I want to get on to chapter 5 now, because we're coming. I read this chapter last night when I was preparing for this shiur. I'm not going to say what I think. I'm just going to read you the chapter, and I want you to tell me what you think about it. I'm not going to poison your mind with my my thoughts. I want to hear yours first. Let's just read the chapter together. Vayavo kol shiftei Yisrael el David Chevrona, and all the tribes of Israel came to David to Hebron. Vayomru, and they said, Hineni atzmecha uvasarcha anachnu. We are your bone and your flesh. We're your flesh and bone. Gam etzmol gam shimshon biyot Shaul melech aleinu. Also yesterday and the day before, meaning in the past, Shaul was king over us. Ata hayita hamotzi v'hamevi. You were the one who took us out and brought us in, meaning you were the head of the army. Et Yisrael vayoma Hashem lecha. And Hashem said to you, Ata tir'eh et ami, you will shepherd my people at Yisrael, va'ata tiel nagid al Yisrael, you will be a ruler on Israel. So the tribes came to Hebron and said that to David, and then vayavo kol ziknei Yisrael, all the elders of Israel came el hamelech to the king, to Hebron, vayichrot lehem hamelech David brit, and King David cuts a bris with them in Hebron, lifnei Hashem, before Hashem. Vayimshachu et David lamelech al Yisrael, and they anointed David as king over Israel. Ben 30 shana David b'malacho, 40 shana malach. He was 30 when he became king, and he reigned for 40 years. Bechevron malach al Yehuda 7 shanim, v'shisha chodashim. He reigned 7.5 years in Hebron as melech over Yehuda. Uve'Yerushalayim malach 33 shana al kol Yisrael v'Yehuda. And in Jerusalem he reigned 33 years over all Israel and Judah. Okay, let's stop there. What are your thoughts on those 5 psukim? Anything? What comes into your mind? First thing that comes into your mind. Barbara.
I'll read it again.
What comes into your mind when you read those 5 psukim?
Where were they before that?
He reached his vocation.
Okay, he's reached his peak. Yeah. What did you say, Paul?
Where were they before all that?
Why has this family just turned up now?
Okay. Well, first of all, why are they his family?
No,
called Shiftei Yisrael. They're not his family, really, are they? They were previously his enemies. They're now just deciding that they're his family because it suits them.
On their best, yeah.
It's
Israel. They need a leader.
No. They're not his family.
Whoa, one at a time. Michael Krauss.
Yeah, Israel is now united
Israel is now united. Yes, Philip.
They need a leader. They need a
leader. Yes, Anita.
Took them a while to accept.
Took them a while. Okay, took them 7.5 years. Okay, anyone else?
It was a bit too good. I think that suddenly
what? Sorry, Peter.
It seemed a bit too good to be true. Suddenly they were all palsy-walsy, after a...
Okay, it's interesting. Okay, I didn't have any of those particular thoughts, although they're all correct. I'll tell you what my thoughts were. I thought, what an anticlimax. We've been building up this thing that David HaMelech is going to become the king over the whole of Israel, unite the whole country. We've had a split kingdom up till now, and now we've got a united kingdom. And it's over in like 3 or 4 psukim, right? They came, they did a deal, they anointed him as King David over Israel. Where's all the pomp and ceremony? Where's the big fuss? I was really disappointed when I read this last night. I thought, I'm waiting for
But David wasn't one for pomp and ceremony.
Maybe that's the point. I'm waiting for the golden carriage to come out of Buckingham Palace to Westminster Abbey. I'm waiting for the whole caboodle here to be to be on TV with not David Attenborough, what's his name? Dimbleby. Jonathan Dimbleby's commentary, and I get nothing. I was really disappointed with that. Anyway, interesting. None of you thought that, so maybe it's just my mishegas. Okay, so all of those things are right. We've now got a United Kingdom, and we've had in verse 4 already a summary. All very nice. He became king when he was 30, and he reigned for 40 years. Kol Tov. Okay, what is 40 years?
But he did.
1 second, David. Did he really reign for 40 years?
No, because there was a gap in the middle.
What is 40 years? What is the number 40 tell us?
Long time.
Yeah, a lot. It rained for 40 days and 40 nights, right?
Rav Steinsaltz says units of this size appear multiple times in various contexts and often indicate a complete era.
Yes, a long time, a complete era. Moshe Rabbeinu went up to Har Sinai 40 days and 40 nights. They were in the Midbar 40 years, right? The idea of 40 is a completion. It's a whole to kufa. It's a long time, a completion, and usually it's something which is settled, right? It's a settled time. When you use that idea, we had it in Shoftim as well a few times. Escapes me just on the top of my head which particular Shoftim it was, but on 1 or 2 occasions we had the idea that 40 years, and 40 years there was peace in Israel for 40 years, and then they misbehaved again, and it all started all over again. 40 years is a period of time which is used over and over again to mean completion, often, not always, but often to mean a peaceful sort of time, a settled time at least, let's say that. And so we've got this summary. Right.
Hold it for a second, but he didn't actually reign throughout the 40 years. There was a gap sort of late on where one of his sons took over, didn't he? He had to escape for a while.
Yeah, I think that's you're right. That's counted within the 40 years because that was a failed coup in the end. Yeah, that was towards the end of the reign, correct. So having now gone to verse 5 and seen the summary of verse 4 and 5, the summary of his reign, the summary of his reign, we now go back and get a bit more detail. We're on verse 6 now, because what we do know from verse 4 and 5 is that Jerusalem was his capital. But right at the moment, in the chronological, there's another word, chronology, chronicles, same word. There we go. In the chronological order of things, right? At the moment, Jerusalem belongs to which group of people?
Benjamin.
Yeah. The Jesubites, right? Yevushim. The Yevushim. Yevusim, I think it is actually. Yevusim. Yeah. So yeah, they're Yevusi. Okay. So he's got to conquer it before he can make it his capital. So now we're going to go back. Tanakh is going to go back, having told us that actually he reigned in Jerusalem for 33 years. He's now going to go back and tell us how he conquered Jerusalem in the first place, right? So this is we've had the summary, and now we're going to go and get the detail. So verse 6, Vayelech hamelech va'anashav Yerushalayim el hayevusi yoshev haaretz. And he went, the king went. Oh, by the way, one more thing. This word here in verse 3. Hamelech David. Hamelech David. That's the first time David is referred to.
Johnny, is it
Hamelech
possible to
David.
make the text a bit bigger? I can't see. It's too small.
Well, I can't, so
Okay,
you'll have to get better glasses.
right.
So Hamelech David, the King David. This is the first time he's referred to as King David, because at this point he's about to be anointed, and they anointed David as king over Israel. Just one thing, actually, before we go on to the conquest of Jerusalem, Rav Bazak points out something which is a bit strange. Look at verses 1, verses 3. 1 and 3. Vayavo kol shiftei Yisrael el David Chevrona. All the tribes of Israel came, and they said, "We are your kings. We are your flesh and blood." Right? And then verse 3, all the elders came and anointed him king. Rav Bazak points out that you'd expect it to be the other way round, that the first delegation to David to see how the land lies, to try and persuade him, as it were, or to see how he feels about becoming their whole king over everybody, you'd expect that to be the elders. And then when the elders go back and report to the tribes, yes, we've done the deal, then you'd expect all the tribes to come and there to be an anointing of the king. But it seems to be the other way around here. The tribesmen came, and what Rav Bazak wants to say is that this was, he doesn't say this actually sort of mafurash, but this is what I understand from what he's saying, what I take out of it. And that is that this was a popular uprising, that the Shiftei Yisrael, the tribes of Israel themselves, decided that they wanted David as their king. And this was like, a bottom-up approach as opposed to a top-down approach. This was not the elders going and doing a deal and then saying to the people, right, we've done a deal, David's now your king. This was the people coming and saying, we want David as our king. They come and persuade David that they are his flesh and blood. They go back to the elders, and the elders say, okay, well, we'll go and, we accept that. And it was a bottom-up approach, if you like, a revolution, as opposed to something which was forced upon the people by the leaders. Just an interesting little point on the language there of how that worked. Right, let's go.
Corin's got a good comment on that as well, Johnny.
Let's have a look. Where does it say it, David? Which page?
246 at the bottom.
246 at the bottom. Elders as tribal representatives. The elders of Israel in this verse are the leaders representing the tribes. The leadership of elders was widespread at all times in the ancient Near East. Tribal and patriarchal societies were built from the basic family unit, Beit Avot, as seen in Joshua. A group of families or a very large family formed a clan, a mishpacha, several of which formed a shevet. The elders, as the leading householders, were the governing body of the clan.
Just read the next paragraph as well, which I think is relevant.
In 1 Kings 12, the elders seem to be an official group, a permanent standing advisory council at the royal court. However, most other references to the elders in Tanakh indicated they were called together only in times of urgent need or special circumstances, or as judges. So that's why they were called, because they needed to crown him king. Actually, they didn't have much to do, only at times of great need. That makes sense, doesn't it? Thank you, David. Right, we're going to conquer Jerusalem now. Very, very strange psukim coming up here. We're not going to get into this in any great detail now, but we will hopefully next week. We'll just do a little bit of superficial looking at the story. Verse 6. And the king and his men went to Jerusalem, to the Yevusim, who were the inhabitants of the land. Why had they not yet conquered Jerusalem? Why were the Yevusim still there?
It was a fortified city.
Yes, okay. But there were other fortified cities that Yehoshua had conquered. Why did Yehoshua not manage to conquer it? Well, go back to Yehoshua. Go back to chapter 15 of Yehoshua, to the last verse. It's on the screen for you there. We'll just go a bit earlier on. See all these names here, all this stuff, right? This is all the stuff that Joshua conquered. I'm going all the way. Look at all these names here. If Jeffrey had been here, I'd have got him to read out all of this stuff, and he'd have been tripping over all these names because they're not familiar to us. But all of this stuff, all these places, Ziklag, we've heard of that place before. All these places, right? These were where they were, where Joshua was marauding and conquering, until we come to verse 63. V'etayevusi yoshvei Yerushalayim, the Jebusites, the inhabitants of Yerushalayim. Just go back to our pasuk. Ayevusi yoshev haaretz, same words, right? The inhabitants of Jerusalem, Bnei Yehuda, lo yachlu Bnei Yehuda lahorisham. The children of Yehuda were not able lahorisham, to inherit them from Yerusha. It says here to drive them out, but you inherit them after you drive them out. The translation of that word actually is the same word as Yerusha. To inherit them, in other words, to get rid of them, and they could then take over their property. They couldn't do it. Vayeshev hayevusi et bnei Yehuda b'Yerushalayim ad hayom hazeh. And the Yevusi dwelt with Bnei Yehuda in Yerushalayim until this day. So there was, is that not fascinating? There was a coexistence in Jerusalem between the Bnei Yehuda. What are we known as today?
Yehudim.
Yehudim. We could call ourselves Bnei Yehuda, could we not? And the Yevusim were the indigenous population. So there was a, if not a peace, there was a coexistence in Jerusalem at this time, at the time of Joshua, between the Bnei Yehuda and the Yevusim. Okay? Now then.
Palestinian.
Yeah, maybe. Just pointing it out. Okay, now, where is Yerushalayim? In whose territory is Yerushalayim?
Benjamin.
And Yehuda. It's in two territories.
In two territories. Why did David choose Yerushalayim as his capital? Why didn't he just stay in Hebron?
He wanted to unite the people, not only the people themselves, but he wanted a city, a neutral city.
Yeah, he's got to tread carefully, hasn't he? Because who was the leader of Binyamin? Shaul and his family. He's now taking over them. It's not been straightforward, has it? It's taken him 7.5 years. We've had Avner killed by Yoav. We've had Rechav and Baana kill Ishbosheth. We've had David's men kill Rechav and Baana. All of this, we've had the 12 versus 12 business, didn't we, with the Yoav and Avner, and the 320 people that got killed after that. It's not been plain sailing. So you're right. David doesn't want to impose on Bnei Binyamin his rule from Hebron. He has to, it's a bit like, Lahavdil, I suppose, that if you were the monarch of England back in the day, and you wanted to conquer Scotland and become the monarch of a united kingdom, you would be well served to put your capital somewhere up on the border in Cumbria or in the you know,
Eric
the Scottish borders, right? To try and rule the unruly Scots from London would not be a clever idea, would it, Peter?
To this day,
Correct.
idea.
Huh?
To this day, it's not a good idea.
There you go. You see? You see?
Red herring. Can I have a red herring?
Go on.
When Australia became a federation, because it was different settlements, the argument was where to put the capital, whether to put it in Sydney or in Melbourne. And the argument was so volatile that they ended up finding creating a city halfway between, literally on the map, halfway between, and they called it Canberra. And that became the capital.
That's not a red herring at all, Hannah. That's a very, very important point. They did it in America as well. America has 50 states, does it? Yeah? Or is it 51? Yeah. I don't know. 50 states. Right? Which state is the capital in?
District of Columbia.
Yeah, none of them is the answer. It's not in any of the states. It's its own district for the same reason. And the source of that wise decision to put Canberra, make Canberra the capital, and to make Washington, D.C. the capital and not in the state is exactly what David did. He wanted a place that was neither in Yehudah nor was it in Binyamin, or it was in both. Now, I'm going to show you something fascinating to end with here. I've just shown you this pasuk in Yoshua, which tells us that the inhabitants of Jerusalem, the Yevusim, could not be driven out by the children of Yehudah, which would indicate that Yehudah tried to make it into their territory and failed, correct? Now look at this pasuk. It's in Shoftim. V'tayevusi Yoshev Yerushalayim lo horishu b'nei Binyamin. And the children of Benjamin did not drive out the Jebusites that inhabit Jerusalem. V'yeshev hayevusi et b'nei Binyamin b'Yerushalayim ad hayom hazeh. And the Yevusites lived with the children of Benjamin in Jerusalem until this day. Does that pasuk sound familiar to you?
The same as they say with Judea as well.
It's exactly the same. Look at this. Exactly the same, except one says Yehudah and one says Binyamin, which is clearly an indication that Jerusalem belonged to neither exclusively to Yehudah nor exclusively to Binyamin, but they both felt a connection to it, and they both attempted to conquer it, and they couldn't conquer it on their own. Bnei Yehudah could not conquer it. We know that from Yehoshua chapter 15, and Binyamin could not conquer it because we know that from Shoftim. What chapter is it? Forgotten. Chapter 1. Okay, Shoftim chapter 1. Binyamin couldn't conquer it. Who could conquer it?
Israel.
David, king of all Israel. In other words, Yerushalayim could only be a, inverted commas, Jewish Israelite city when what?
United.
When they were united. When they were united. If the people of Israel are united, Jerusalem will be conquered. If they are divided, they will not be able to conquer Jerusalem. Neither Yehudim nor Bnei Binyamin will be able to do it on their own. It is only when they are united, and this is obviously not talking specifically about the physical and military conquest. We're here talking about greater spiritual things as well. I think it's a fascinating idea, this, that if you take a little journey around Tanakh, you see in Yoshua that Yehudah could not do it. You go into Shoftim, Benjamin couldn't do it, and you arrive at Shmuel Bet, and David conquers Jerusalem as David Melech Yisrael. I think that's a fabulous place to stop. I think that's something that we can all think about. Yes, Hannah.
On that note, why Dafka Yehuda and Benjamin?
Because that was their first of all, it's on their territories, and secondly, they were the two main tribes. Yehuda was the tribe of Yehuda, and Benjamin was the lead tribe of the rest of Israel.
But why that's on a certain level. But why were those two tribes chosen to be the leading tribes?
Because Yehuda was the main tribe of the children of Leah, and Binyamin, after the split of Ephraim and Manasseh, Binyamin was the representative of the children of Rachel. And it's this whole thing of the children of Leah and the children of Rachel could not get on. Go back to the Yosef story. Everything in the Tanakh stems from the Yosef story. The one story which is the most important story in the whole of the Torah, you could argue, is the Yosef story. The fact that the children of Leah, well, let me finish. The children of Leah and the children of Rachel could not get on. It's what made us come into Egypt in the first place, etc., etc. Here, when you unite the children of Leah and you unite the children of Rachel, you get a David Melech Yisrael.
But again, Yosef is generally the representative of the children of Rachel, and we have Mashiach ben Yosef.
Later on that happens. Ephraim, at the next split.
So why? So the question is, why Benjamin? The Midrash says. Hello.
Go on, carry on.
The Midrash says that when Jacob was coming back from Lavan, and he met Esav, and they bowed to Esav, the only one that didn't bow was Benjamin. He never bowed to Esav because he wasn't born yet. So Benjamin warranted having the Beit HaMikdash in his territory from the fact that he hadn't ever bowed to Esav.
Okay, that's fair enough. But how does Yehuda merit it then?
How does Yehuda was the natural leader of the children of Leah. He was sent by Yaakov also to prepare Mitzrayim for the coming, for them all coming down and everything. Yehuda was always in the leadership, and then Yehuda behaved exemplary with after his two sons died,
Tamar,
and he was just the natural leader.
Okay. That fits, but it doesn't tell us why the Beit HaMikdash was in his territory. If we're going to say that Binyamin's zechut was because he didn't bow to Esau because he wasn't born, that's not a zechut for Binyamin.
It may not be
something great that he did. He wasn't born.
It may not be Yehuda's zechut. It may be David's zechut, Ruth's zechut.
All those things. Very interesting. Yeah. Okay, we're well out of time. Fascinating. We didn't get to the bit that I wanted to get to today, which is fine, because we will get to it next time. We are going to conquer Jerusalem next week, please God. Any questions before we leave today?
Thank you.
No. Okay.